He found a little girl alone in the barn, then heard her whisper, "Mama's dying outside." Winter, 1887, western Wyoming. Snow blanketed the land like silence made solid. The wind screamed down from the mountains, carrying a sharpness that sliced through wool and leather alike. Ash Hollow was quiet under the storm's weight, and the Granger homestead, small, worn, but standing firm, sat hunched against the cold, like an old man shouldering through grief. Isaac Granger, 35, wide-shouldered and weathered, trudged through knee-deep snow toward the old barn with his 6-year-old son, Noah, close behind. "Stay close," he said, turning briefly. His voice was low and steady. Noah nodded, clutching his small coat tighter. The barn loomed ahead, crooked and half sunk into drifts. No one had used it in years, not since the fever took Mary, Isaac's wife, and left silence in her place. They were checking the structure in case the coming blizzard turned worse. It was already worse. As they neared, a faint sound caught Isaac's ear, soft, like shuffling straw or a muffled bump. He held out an arm, stopping Noah. The boy obeyed without question. Another sound, this time, clearer, a creak, a small rustle. Inside, Isaac reached for the handle, slowly. The old door groaned as it swung open. The cold inside bit even sharper than outside. The air smelled of damp wood, old manure, and rusted iron. Frost clung to the rafters. A weak shaft of gray light filtered through a broken slat. Then he saw her. In the far corner, curled behind a bale of old hay, sat a little girl, no more than 3 years old. Her cheeks were flushed raw from the cold, her dress thin and torn at the hem. Dirt streaked her face. Her small hands gripped a short stick, maybe from firewood, maybe from a broken tool handle. She held it like a weapon. Isaac dropped to one knee. The girl flinched and raised the stick. Noah gasped, but Isaac held up a hand to silence him. He stayed perfectly still. The child's eyes were wide, wild, not with confusion, but with memory. She had seen fear before. She knew what danger looked like, and she had chosen to fight. Her breath came in short gasps, visible in the freezing air. Then, her voice, a rasp, barely more than a whisper. "Don't hit me. Mama's dying outside." Isaac's heart clenched. This wasn't a runaway. This wasn't a lost child. This was something else, something far crueler. He slowly raised both hands above his head. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "I'm here to help. We'll find your mama, all right?" She didn't answer, but her arms dropped a little. The stick lowered. Only then did Isaac crawl forward, slowly, his movements as soft as snow settling. He reached her side, pulled the wool scarf from his own neck, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She trembled under the touch, but didn't pull away. Noah stood behind, silent, eyes wide. "What's your name?" Isaac asked. She looked at him. "Ellie," she whispered. Isaac glanced at Noah, then back to the barn's broken door, where the wind howled louder, like a voice calling out. He looked down at Ellie again. "Let's go find your mama, Ellie." He lifted her gently into his arms. She didn't resist, and somewhere, deep in the snow and wind, someone waited, dying, or already gone. Isaac stepped out into the storm with Ellie in his arms, wrapping her tight in his coat. The snow whipped at his face, and the wind howled louder now, like it had found something to mourn. He squinted into the pale blur, scanning the ground. There, small, uneven footprints heading north, away from the barn. They staggered, doubled back, vanished in drifts, then reappeared further on. Whoever had left them had been stumbling, weak. He followed. Ellie trembled against his chest, her breath short and ragged. "Can you show me?" he asked, gently. The girl raised a weak arm, pointing ahead with tiny fingers. Isaac pushed forward, boots crunching through frost. Noah followed close, silent, watching his father with wide, solemn eyes. Then he saw it. A shape, barely more than a lump, half buried behind the wide trunk of a snow-laden pine. He hurried over. It was a woman. She lay curled on her side, arms tucked around her chest. Her coat was thin, soaked through. One sleeve had fallen back, revealing a wound on her shoulder, an old gash, poorly stitched, now red and angry with infection. Her lips were blue, her skin far too pale. "God," Isaac muttered. Ellie squirmed in his arms, suddenly frantic. "Mama," she cried out. "Mama, wake up, please, don't die. I don't need food, I just want you, please." Isaac dropped to his knees, setting Ellie gently down beside her mother. The girl crawled over, clutching the woman's cold hand. Isaac reached out, pressed his fingers to the woman's neck, a pulse, faint, barely there. He leaned close, trying to feel breath. A thin cloud escaped her lips. "She's alive," he whispered. The woman stirred, barely. Her head rolled toward the sound, but her eyes didn't open. Isaac didn't waste another second. He slid his arms beneath her and lifted her, feeling how light she was, like her bones had forgotten to hold anything. "Noah," he said, "take Ellie. Walk slow, stay close." Noah nodded and held out his arms. Ellie looked up, wide-eyed, hesitated, but then let him carry her. Her trust in the boy, even now, was stronger than fear. Isaac began the slow march back through the snow. The cabin loomed through the blur, its chimney coughing out smoke from the fire he'd left burning low. Inside, the warmth felt like another world. He laid the woman gently on the bed near the hearth. Noah helped Ellie out of her soaked clothes, wrapping her in fresh blankets. Isaac peeled away the woman's damp coat, careful not to touch the wound. "Get more blankets," Isaac told Noah, "and dry socks." As the boy ran to fetch them, Isaac looked down at the woman again. Her face, young, maybe in her late 20s, was gaunt, dirt smudging her cheeks. Her hair was tangled and matted, but he could still see the softness there, a kind of quiet beauty beneath the exhaustion. "Who are you?" he murmured. Later that night, when the storm pressed against the windows like fists, Isaac sat in the chair beside her, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Ellie had curled into a blanket beside the fire. Noah sat nearby, reading aloud softly to her from one of his picture books. The girl's eyes blinked heavy with sleep. Isaac didn't ask questions. Not yet. But in his mind, a name began to form from the storm and firelight. Catherine Albright. And if she'd truly been out there with that child for 3 days, walking through snow, wounded, hunted, then he had no use for questions, only action. As the fire cracked, Catherine stirred, her lips parting, a breath escaping like the start of a cry. Her eyes fluttered, briefly, just long enough to find her daughter asleep on the floor. Then they closed again. Safe. For the first time in a long time, someone had found her. And not to hurt, but to carry her home. Catherine drifted in and out of consciousness for 2 full days. She murmured nonsense in her fever dreams, half prayers, half pleas. Her body thrashed beneath the quilts. Isaac kept a cool cloth on her brow and fed her warm broth, a spoonful at a time. Each hour, he changed the poultice on her wound, blending crushed pine bark and sage into a thick paste that smelled sharp and earthy. He hardly spoke. Instead, he let the fire talk, crackling gently as the snow battered the cabin walls. The warmth pushed back the cold 1 room at a time. Noah watched from a corner, quiet as a mouse. Ellie sat next to him, knees drawn up, the two of them clutching wooden toys Isaac had carved years ago for a boy who had once been smaller. "She's real sick," Noah whispered. Ellie nodded. "But she's strong." They played in the afternoons, stacking blocks, whispering stories. Ellie did not speak much, but when she did, her voice was brighter, safe. By the 3rd day, Catherine stirred for longer. The first time she opened her eyes and saw Isaac beside her, she flinched, her breath caught, her arms moved as if to shield herself. Isaac backed up immediately, hands open, voice low. "You're safe," he said, No one here will hurt you. Her gaze darted to the corner. Ellie, giggling as Noah handed her a tiny carved horse. Catherine relaxed, just a little. She blinked, lips dry, and croaked, "My daughter?" "She's fine," Isaac replied. "Warm. Fed. She hasn't left your side until today." Catherine's head sank back into the pillow. She whispered, "Thank you," and her eyes closed again. Later that night, Isaac sat in the rocking chair by the hearth, mending a torn coat sleeve. Catherine stirred again and turned her head. "I do not know your name," she rasped. He glanced up. "Isaac Granger." "Thank you, Mr. Granger." "No need for thanks. Just rest." But she watched him a little longer this time. The following morning, Ellie tugged Catherine's sleeve and held out a piece of paper, rough and wrinkled, drawn with charcoal from the edge of the firewood bin. On it were 4 stick figures: a tall man, a woman with long hair, and 2 children. They stood in front of a square house with smoke curling from the chimney. "That's you and me and Mama and the man who gives us soup," Ellie explained. Catherine blinked down at the drawing. Her lip trembled. "I drew us by the fire," Ellie added proudly, "because the fire means we don't have to run." Catherine clutched the paper to her chest. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. It was the first time she had cried since fleeing in the snow. That evening, Noah approached her, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "Can I ask something?" Catherine looked up from the quilt she was folding. "Of course. Are you gonna stay? Like, forever stay?" Catherine's breath hitched. She looked at Isaac across the room, his back turned as he adjusted the kettle. Then she looked down at Noah, whose small face held more hope than any child should dare carry. She could not answer. Not yet. But she reached out and touched his shoulder, and the boy smiled. Outside, the snow finally slowed. Inside, laughter began to return. Catherine stood more steadily each day, her color brightening, her voice growing stronger. Still, she never strayed far from the fire, nor from her daughter, but she no longer flinched when Isaac came near. And sometimes, when she thought he was not looking, she watched him move through the house, silent, steady, without expectation. She had known men who spoke too much, shouted more, and struck hardest when silent. But Isaac's quiet made space for healing. He never asked about her past, never questioned her fear. Instead, he offered what she had not known she needed: safety, not through words, but through presence. And for the first time in her long, weary memory, Catherine did not feel like running. Not tonight, not anymore. The fire crackled low that night, sending flickers of amber across the log walls. Outside, the snow had settled into a dull silence. Inside, Catherine sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a tin mug of tea that had long gone cold. Isaac stood nearby, polishing an old horseshoe out of habit more than necessity. She had been quiet all day, but now her voice broke the silence. "He used to lock us in the cellar," she said the dark was the only place a woman learned respect. Isaac didn't move. He waited. "He would starve Ellie if I talked back," said one cry from her, "and I'd lose her forever." Her voice cracked, "So I learned to take it, learned not to cry." She looked up. Her eyes were dry. "But I still bled. Sometimes I still feel it." She stood slowly, turned her back to the hearth. Then, wordlessly, she pulled aside her blouse just enough to show him. Red, raw ridges like cruel handwriting carved across her skin. Isaac's hands clenched around the horseshoe. He said nothing. Catherine let the fabric fall back into place. "I used to pray someone would kill him. Then I prayed God would make me strong enough to do it myself." She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a photograph. The edges were torn, the corners singed. It showed her younger, standing beside a man with dark, heavy eyes. Her smile in the photo looked like it had been forced under duress. Wordlessly, she fed the picture to the fire. The flames caught the edge and curled the paper until it blackened, twisted, and vanished into ash. Isaac watched the last ember fall. Then he spoke, low and steady. "If he comes here, he'll find no welcome, and no way out." Catherine turned, her face pale, but calm. "I don't want to be someone to protect, Isaac. I don't want to be broken anymore." Isaac shook his head. "You're not." She blinked, surprised. "You walked through snow carrying a child and wounds that should have dropped any man," he said. "You kept her warm while starving yourself. That's not weakness, that's grit." He stepped closer, but not too close. "But no one should have to be strong alone. Not always." There was silence again, but this time it felt less sharp, more honest. After a while, Catherine looked toward the fire and asked softly, "Your wife, what happened?" Isaac's gaze dropped. His voice was rough when he spoke. "Tuberculosis. Took her slow. She was just 28. I held her hand at the end, said I'd protect her. And I couldn't." His jaw tightened. "Noah was only 4. He cried for weeks after. Then he stopped. That scared me more." He looked up at her. "I know what it's like to feel helpless." Their eyes met. Two people scraped raw by the world, but still standing. "Thank you," Catherine whispered. "Not just for saving me, but for not treating me like I'm broken glass." "I don't see glass," Isaac said. "I see steel." For the first time, she smiled, not the cautious kind, but a real, flickering smile that reached her eyes. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, for just a moment, it could not reach them. And in that moment, something shifted. Not love, not yet, but understanding. The first step on a long, hard road neither had dared hope to walk again. And they were no longer walking it alone. The snow had begun to melt in patches, leaving behind muddy trails and puddles of cold runoff around the barn. Spring was still a promise, not yet a reality, but the days were longer, and the air no longer bit with every breath. Catherine stood on the porch, rolling up her sleeves. In her hands was a mixing bowl, and beside her a tray of dough ready for baking. The flour dust on her dress was new, but so was the light in her eyes. Inside, the cabin smelled of yeast and firewood. Noah peeked over the table's edge. "Are those biscuits?" he asked, wide-eyed. "Sort of," Catherine said, smiling. "Don't tell anyone, it's my first try." "I won't," he whispered conspiratorially, "but I'll be the taste tester, for safety." She laughed, an actual, clear laugh. It startled even her. Later that day, she walked with Isaac into town for the first time. Ash Hollow was small, but eyes carried far. People paused as she passed. Whispers followed. A man muttered something under his breath as they walked by the saloon. A woman from the church crossed the street rather than meet their eyes. But Catherine kept her chin high. In the general store, she gathered flour, soap, and cloth. At the counter, the clerk raised an eyebrow. "You're staying with Granger?" "Yes," she replied simply, and held his gaze until he looked away. On the walk back, Isaac said nothing, but when she glanced sideways, she saw the way his jaw was tight, how his fists clenched inside his coat pockets. "I'm not ashamed," she said. He looked at her then. "I know. I just hate that you have to prove anything to anyone." That night, Catherine returned to the cabin to find the old storeroom cleared. The window was fixed. A small rug lay by the bed. A new quilt, clearly hand-stitched, covered it. A shelf had been hung, and on it sat a tiny wooden bird carved from pine. She stood in the doorway, silent. Isaac came up behind her. "It's not much," he said, "but I thought maybe you and Ellie should have a space that's yours." She turned to him. Her eyes were glassy. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." A few days later, while Catherine hung laundry in the yard, Noah approached her. His arms were folded, lips pursed in deep thought, like he had something very serious to say. "My mama," he said finally. "She used to sing when she baked. You sing too." Catherine paused, unsure what to say. "I think she would have liked you," he added. Before she could respond, he leaned in, and wrapped his arms around her waist. Catherine knelt, hugging him back and smoothing his hair. "That means more than you know," she whispered. That evening, while Ellie and Noah played by the fireplace, Catherine sat next to Isaac at the table, darning a sock. The warmth from the fire cast soft shadows across his face. He was silent, focused on carving something small from a block of wood. She watched him for a moment, then reached out and laid her hand gently over his. He looked up, surprised. "I don't know if I deserve any of this," she said softly. "This peace, this kindness." Isaac said nothing at first. He just turned his hand over and let their fingers intertwine. "You don't have to earn safety," he said. "You just need to believe you're allowed to have it." She swallowed hard. "Thank you, for seeing me, for trusting me." He squeezed her hand once. "I don't trust easy," he said. "But I see the fight in you, Catherine. That's what I trust." In the silence that followed, their hands remained together on the table between them. The fire crackled, and the children's laughter filled the cabin. For the first time in years, happiness didn't feel like a dream. It felt real, fragile, yes, but real. And it belonged to them. The morning began like any other. The air was crisp, and the last of the snow clung to the trees like reluctant ghosts. Catherine was kneading dough in the kitchen. Isaac was in the barn, checking the tack. The children were playing just outside, their laughter ringing like wind chimes in the yard. Until the silence came. "Noah?" Catherine stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Ellie?" Noah came running, panting, wide-eyed. "Mama, a man, he took Ellie. He pulled her onto a wagon and rode off." Catherine dropped the bowl she was holding. It shattered against the porch. Isaac burst from the barn. "Which way?" Noah pointed. "Toward the ridge. He had a black horse." Isaac was already moving, gun strapped, boots heavy. Catherine knelt to grab her coat, but under the porch railing she spotted something. A piece of parchment, pinned to a wooden post with a knife. She pulled it free with trembling hands. The handwriting was sharp and angry. "You want the girl? Come alone, Catherine, or she dies like her whore of a mother should have. E." She stared at the words until her vision blurred. Then she turned, fire replacing fear in her chest. "I'm going," she said. Isaac took the note, read it, then crumpled it slowly. "You're not going alone," he said, calm but firm. "I have to. If he sees you, he'll see a man who's not afraid of him." Catherine tried to argue, but Isaac's voice cut through her panic. "You're not alone anymore, Catherine." That night they rode into the trees. The moon was high, casting long shadows through the pines. Snow crunched beneath hooves. Isaac rode ahead, rifle ready. Catherine clutched her coat tight, every nerve trembling. At a clearing deep in the woods, they saw the glow of fire. Emmett stood by it, a bottle in one hand, a revolver in the other. Ellie sat on the ground beside him, arms tied, cheeks streaked with tears. "You came," Emmett slurred, "and you brought your hero." Isaac stepped forward. "Let her go." Emmett laughed. "Not till I get what's mine." "You never owned her," Catherine said coldly. "You never owned any of us." Emmett turned the gun on Ellie. "Don't test me." Isaac raised his rifle. "You shoot, you die." But Emmett was wild, his eyes glassy. "You think she loves you? She's mine. She always was." In a split second, he aimed at Catherine. Ellie screamed. Catherine lunged, arms out, shielding her daughter just as the gun fired. The world exploded in noise. Isaac's rifle cracked a breath later, and Emmett went down, screaming, his leg shattered. Catherine crumpled to the ground, blood soaking her sleeve. Ellie cried out, crawling to her. "Mama, no!" Isaac rushed forward, kicking the gun away from Emmett's reach, then tied the man's hands behind his back with his belt. Catherine groaned but opened her eyes. "It's just the shoulder," she gasped. "I'm okay." Isaac ripped fabric to press against the wound. "Stay with me, just breathe." Ellie clung to her mother's waist, sobbing. I thought you were gone. I thought he took you forever." Catherine kissed the top of her head, eyes glassy. "No one's taking us anymore." 10 minutes later, a lantern appeared through the trees. Sheriff Barnes and 2 deputies rode in fast, drawn by the gunfire. Barnes saw Emmett writhing on the ground and Catherine bleeding in the snow. "You've got explaining to do, Granger," he said. Isaac stood up slowly, face calm. "This man kidnapped a child, shot her mother. He got the justice he deserved." Barnes looked to Catherine, who nodded weakly. "He's telling the truth." The sheriff spat to the side. "Good. Because I'm tired of men like him thinking this territory belongs to them." The deputies hauled Emmett up, ignoring his protests and curses. As they disappeared into the dark, Catherine, still in Isaac's arms, whispered, "You didn't have to come." He looked down at her, voice low. "I lost one family already," he said. "I'm not losing another." Ellie pressed her small hand into his. That night, as the forest closed back in, and the snow fell silently once more, the shadows that had hunted Catherine for years were finally left behind. And in their place was something like hope. The echo of the gunshot faded into the trees, swallowed by the quiet of the winter woods. Snow drifted lazily through the pines, soft as breath. Catherine, her shoulders soaked in blood, clutched Ellie tightly against her chest, as if afraid the little girl might vanish if she let go. Isaac knelt beside them, his hands already moving with practiced calm. He checked the wound, through the shoulder. Clean exit, no sign of shattered bone, but the bleeding was heavy, and her face had gone pale. "Ellie," Catherine whispered. "I'm right here, Mama," Ellie sobbed. Isaac tore a strip from his own shirt and pressed it against the wound. "She's safe now," he said, his voice low and steady. "You both are. Emmett's done." From the trees, Noah came running, stumbling over roots, eyes wide with fear. He dropped to his knees beside Ellie and hugged her tight. "You're okay," he breathed. Catherine's free arm reached for him too, and there, in the frozen woods, surrounded by blood and ash and melting snow, 4 lives clung together. The cold still bit, but warmth bloomed, not from fire, but from something older, stronger. Love. 3 days later, the storm had passed. At the Granger homestead, the wood stove burned bright. A kettle whistled softly. Sunlight spilled through frosted windows, painting golden squares on the floor. Catherine lay in the bedroom, her arm in a sling, skin no longer ghostly pale. She stirred as the door creaked open. "Here," Noah said, setting a bowl on the nightstand. "It's mostly broth. Pa says that's better till your belly's stronger." "Thank you, sweetheart." Ellie was curled beside her, head on her mother's lap. Catherine ran her good hand gently through the child's hair, watching her breathe. Across the room, Isaac sat by the fire. He was whittling again, something small, careful. A bird, maybe, or a horse. "You don't have to do all this," Catherine said softly, her voice just above a whisper. He looked up, eyes tired but kind. "I know," he said, "but I want to." A silence passed between them. Not awkward, but full, like the quiet between waves. Catherine reached out her uninjured hand, resting it on his. For the first time, it was not out of need, it was a choice. A week after the clearing, Catherine stood on the porch of Ash Hollow's general store. Snow crunched beneath her boots. Her shoulder still ached, wrapped tight, but she walked steady. Ellie held her good hand, small fingers squeezing. Inside, voices hushed as the bell over the door chimed. She felt the stares, saw the whispering mouths. But she lifted her chin and stepped forward. Behind the counter, Mrs. Jennings raised her brows. "You're the one Isaac Granger brought in," she said. Catherine nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Jennings studied her for a long moment, then stepped out from behind the counter. She knelt in front of Ellie and handed her a small parcel wrapped in wax paper. "A gingerbread man," she said, "just like the ones my daughter used to like." Ellie looked up at her mother, then took it with both hands. "Thank you." "She's got your eyes," Mrs. Jennings added. "And your fire, I think." Catherine's lips parted slightly, but instead of tears, she smiled. A soft, uncertain thing, the kind of smile that comes after too long without. As they turned to leave, other voices followed. "Good to see you out, Miss Albright. We've been praying for you. If you need anything, just say so." Outside, Catherine paused on the porch, blinking against the light. Ash Hollow was still a rough town, still full of pasts, but it was no longer a place she had to run from. It was becoming something else, a place where maybe, just maybe, she could belong. Spring crept slowly into Wyoming. Snow lingered in shadows, but ice had loosened its grip. Along the fence, plum blossoms began to bud, pale and soft against the thaw. At the Granger homestead, winter's hush gave way to laughter. Noah galloped across the yard on a stick horse, hat flapping. Ellie chased behind, Isaac's oversized cowboy hat bouncing on her curls, cowbell in hand. "Yah, yah," she shouted. On the porch, Catherine mended a shirt, needle moving steadily. Her eyes, though, rarely left the children. A quiet smile tugged at her lips. Isaac worked at the forge, hammering a horseshoe. Sparks leapt. He wiped his brow and glanced toward the porch. Their eyes met. He nodded. She nodded back. No words were needed. That evening, the cabin's table was set with care. The smell of fresh bread mingled with stew and roasted carrots. Candlelight flickered gently across the wooden walls. Noah chattered about school, waving his spoon. Ellie added her own stories, laughing. Catherine leaned over, dabbing soup from her daughter's cheek. Isaac refilled mugs with warm cider. His shoulders were loose, his eyes clear. After dinner, as the fire crackled low, Catherine reached into her apron and pulled out a folded letter. "I wrote to my sister," she said, offering it to Isaac. He took it gently. "Want me to take it into town?" She nodded, then paused. "Will you read it?" He opened it. Her handwriting was small but sure. "Dear Clara, it's been too long, too many miles, too many winters, but for the first time in years, I'm not afraid to close my eyes, because when I open them, someone is here, waiting. This place, it's not just safe, it's home." Isaac looked up. Catherine's gaze held steady. "I never thought I'd get to send a letter like that," she said quietly. He reached across the table and took her hand. Their fingers twined, not from fear or need, but choice. Later, the wind brushed against the windows. The hearth glowed orange, filling the room with warmth. Catherine sat beside Isaac, her head on his shoulder, a wool blanket wrapped around them. In front of the fire, Noah and Ellie had fallen asleep, curled together like kittens. "I ran for so long," she whispered. "I thought I'd never stop, but I walked through that barn door and found more than I ever thought I deserved." Isaac's hand tightened around hers. "I lost my heart long ago," he murmured. "Buried it with her, I think. But I found it again, in that barn, with you, and a little girl braver than most men I've known." They sat in quiet, letting the fire speak. Outside, the land still healed, but inside that small wooden cabin, 4 hearts had already begun to bloom. He found a little girl alone in the barn, but what he really found was a reason to believe in love again. If this story moved your heart, if you held your breath in that cold barn, cried with Ellie, or smiled when Catherine found her home, then you're exactly who we told this story for. Love in the Wild West isn't just about gunfire and dust. It's about healing, redemption, and the quiet power of choosing to stay. Hit the hype button if this story touched you. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more unforgettable tales of love, loss, and home. Because sometimes, all it takes is one story to believe in love again.